When I was born, even the infinite horizons of the sky were silenced. No lightning had pierced the darkness, nor had the ancient dance of the seasons joyously shifted in the lofty halls of Olympus. No choir had sung hymns, nor had a god whispered the name that would seal my existence. For I had come into that realm of delicate and flawless beauty as a flaw, a shameful stain on the divine lineage, a bitter echo of the divine order. I was not beautiful. And on Olympus, in this eternal abode perched atop luminous mountains, atop silver clouds, everything ugly was like sin itself, a curse, a deviation from the divine order. Perfection was ingrained in their souls, permeated their very breath, the foundation of their being. I, however, was like a twisted branch straying from that foundation, a shadow, a stain. I had been born a god, but my destiny was far from living as one. The moment I first looked into the eyes of my mother, queen of the gods, mighty Hera, no, it was impossible for me to remember. For that moment was a nothingness, where my existence had not yet fully formed, where my consciousness hovered like a hazy dream. But the first revulsion that burned in her gaze, that deep, sharp disgust, no, I could never forget it. That moment was etched into my mind like a sword strike, searing my soul. If a mother greets her child, her own flesh and blood, with such intense revulsion at birth, it seems that that child's ancient fate is sealed before it even breathes, before it emerges from its mother's womb. That cold hatred in my mother's eyes was both my first greeting and my last farewell. My fate was to fall. From the height, from the sublime, from the brightest peak of existence, to be hurled into the depths of darkness and oblivion. Before I knew the words, before my first cry could fully escape my lips, I was hurled from the highest, most illuminated point of Olympus into the bottomless, bleak abyss of the earth. It was not a fall, but a divine punishment. It was a fall like a star torn from the sky and plummeting into the depths of infinity. Slow, painful, with no end in sight. I don't know how long I lingered in the air as I plummeted from Olympus. Perhaps moments, perhaps eons, perhaps all of eternity. But every moment, every second was etched into my bones, etched into the fibers of my soul. It was then that my body, my tiny, barely taking shape, first learned the meaning of pain. The wind whispered the song of my fall, merciless and cold. As the sky, that magnificent divine sky, relentlessly receded before my eyes, my mother's, yes, my cruel mother's silence shrank to the size of a pinhead and then vanished. The disgust in her gaze mingled with the sky's coldness enveloping me. Meanwhile, below, the terrifying call of uncertainty and infinity echoed. And then all the lights went out. Darkness was all that filled the chambers of my mind, the deepest recesses of my being. That darkness was not a mother's embrace, but the silence of a tomb. The cold hand of the unknown had seized me and was dragging me into a bottomless abyss. The sky had closed over me like the closed eyelids of a giant. I fell and crashed against the earth's most ancient rocks, the subterranean heart of fire. The impact echoed in my soul like the shattering of a mountain, sending sparks flying everywhere. My crippled body, my rigid limbs bore the shock of that first blow, yet miraculously my soul remained intact. Perhaps this was a final ironic favor from the gods. I don't know. For years I clung to the stones with the same hands that carried my weak, twisted, crippled body. I crawled like a cave worm into the depths of the underworld. After the terror that sky had inflicted upon me, the bleak, dim, and desolate silence of the earth felt like a refuge.
That first cave beneath the fire, that first room that would be my refuge, I carved into existence with my bleeding fingers and nails. Every moving stone was a resurrection, every rock a victory for me. The earth that did not recognize me, yes, that cold, that hard earth surprisingly accepted me with its warmth. The warmth of that primordial fire rising from the depths of the earth awakened a glimmer of life in the frozen veins of my body. It was as if the earth did not reject me as my mother had, but rather took me in its arms and embraced me. It was there, underground in that bottomless, lightless realm, that I was born a second time. The first time cursed by my mother, Olympus molded by light. The second time by fire, in the womb of darkness, with a new destiny. In this subterranean realm, where the supreme beings of Olympus, the gods who uttered loud cries of victory and held magnificent feasts, never even mentioned my name and forgot my existence, I stained my hands not with blood, but with iron. Every day, every hour, every moment I felt the cold of rusty metal on my fingertips. I had to become the master of my own destiny, to reshape my own being. This body, found flawed by the gods who created me, I had to recreate with my own hands, with my own will. And I forged myself with fire, with that primal and destructive force, with anvil and hammer. Every hammer blow a cry, every shaping of red-hot iron was an act of rebellion, of resistance. Over time, the sound of pain merged with the hammering, the shadow of despair with the light of the fire. Fire became my confidant. I spoke with its fiery tongue. I breathed with its burning breath. As I hammered the iron, the wounds in my soul seemed to scab over. With each work of art, with each metal I worked, I healed a part of myself. The silence of the underground became a melody in my ears. The hammering, the whispers of iron, the divine rhythm of creation. That cursed fall offered to me by the sky had now become my greatest strength. For I was in the deepest place of the earth, in the heart of fire, beyond the reach of the gods. But deep inside me, questions still burned like embers. They neither melted by fire nor changed shape with hammer. They lingered like poison in the deepest corner of my heart. Why? Why was I created this way? Why did my mother reject me? Why did that lofty heaven remain silent upon my birth? Was beauty a condition of godhood, or was ugliness a curse of existence? The gods were silent. There was no sound, no sign from Olympus. Their voice was only for the luminous, the perfect. For me, there was only silence, a confirmation, a curse. And in the midst of that bottomless silence, I began to make the iron speak. Each piece I bent and hammered in the blazing fire became my whisper. Gold and silver, bronze and iron came to life in my hands. I breathed my soul into them, inscribed my pain. Each piece bore the echo of my fall from Olympus, the shadow of disgust in my mother's eyes, the silence of the loneliness of the underworld. It was my art, my language, it was my cry, and it was proof of my existence as a new, cursed god.
Fire. At first, it was merely a light in the darkness. For years, as my twisted body crawled through the cold, bleak womb of the earth, my eyes losing all memory of the sky, it was that first spark that burned within me. In the infinity of my loneliness and despair, it was the dance of a spark, the whisper of a promise. Then it transformed into a voice. From a whisper, a hiss, a growl, it finally transformed into a dancing song, a hymn. As I watched it, I realized fire didn't just burn. Fire, above all, taught. It whispered of patience, destruction, and recreation. It cried out that those crushed by the bright surface light could only find their own fire in the darkness. And for me, the lonely and excluded one, he became a friend for the first time. He was my bosom buddy, my confidant. Cast from the bright lights of Olympus, from the joy of those sublime halls, I became brothers with the flames in this hot, primordial womb beneath the earth. Some gods are born from stars and walk on clouds bathed in silver glitter, but I was born from a bellows, from the blackness of coal, from the heart of crimson flames. My throne was not on a mountaintop, but in the depths of a bottomless cavern. My crown was not gold, but the stench of iron rust and soot. But this land was my home. This fire was my family. This warmth rising from the depths of the earth was more real, more sincere than the coldness of those who excluded me. Time flowed differently underground. The endless days and nights of Olympus were nothing more than the pounding of hammers, the whispers of red-hot iron, and the deep breaths of bellows. I was lonely, yes, but this loneliness was a loneliness that eroded my soul and shaped me. My hands had changed. My finger, considered imperfect on Olympus, had somehow been bent and crooked, but now it could bend gold and silver like the most delicate lace. My hands had darkened with coal dust and soot, but every stroke, every curve testified to the powerful will of those crooked fingers. Those crooked hands were now so strong and dexterous that they could knead the hardest metal like clay and carve the roughest rock like marble. My eyes, though unaccustomed to the light of the sky, could discern the faintest color, the most delicate glimmer in the red heart of the fire. The dim light of the underground was a revelation to me. I, an outcast among the gods, was now forging their mightiest weapons. They banished me from the gates of Olympus, unable to bear even the sight of me. In their eyes, I was nothing but a disgrace, a flaw. And yet, they needed me. They did not know that every lightning bolt that fell from the hand of mighty Zeus had actually come from my own hands. Every bolt was a spark of my rage and pain. The magnificent, dazzling helmet that protected Athena's head had been forged by 1,000 hammer blows in my smoke-stained forge. In every carving on the helmet, I had secretly whispered my hatred for Olympian beauty. The deadly, bloody spear of Ares, god of war, had been forged by the fires of my pain and loneliness. In every sharp edge of its tip lay a broken piece of my heart. At the birth of each of them, yes, my cursed hands were involved. As I crafted each one with a strange and cruel sweetness welling up within me, I created like an artist and whispered my revenge like a rebel. And with every blow I made, there was this echo. I am still here. In this darkness where you have forgotten me, I create your light. This thought eased my pain somewhat. This world which they saw as flawless, yet I bore a wound, was sustained by my works. Their strength was the strength of my hands. Their victory was the echo of my hammering. It was a victory, but a silent, secret, and lonely one. While the gods celebrated their triumphs at their feasts, I was underground by my fire, sowing the seeds of my next vengeance. But fire doesn't just create, it destroys. Just as it created me, it continued to burn me. While it gave me mastery and strength, it also fueled the pain, hatred, and desire for revenge within me. Anyone who gets too close to fire either loses themselves or is cursed. I experienced oath. As I forged the iron, my soul transformed. It began to resemble stone, iron, and fire. I transformed from a tender, fragile child of a god into a vengeful, arduous, and patient craftsman. My heart beat like a red-hot coal, each beat burned a memory, a pain into ashes. I poured my pain into gold, my loneliness into silver. I didn't want to see their shining faces, so I reflected my pain, my shame, in every shining metal. And one day, all the hatred, all the loneliness within me boiled down to such a state that the metal I had forged in fire was no longer an ordinary weapon, but an instrument of vengeance. I created such a work that even the other gods were forced to remain silent before it. It was a throne of opulent gold, adorned with delicate carvings. In every carving, every curve, every flower, lay the pain of my fall from Olympus, the hatred in my mother's gaze, and the bottomless loneliness of the underworld. The throne's arms seemed poised to gently envelop its occupants, but in reality, they were chains meant to enslave them. Beneath its dazzling beauty lay a deadly deception. This throne was a trap. The time had not yet come. My anger and desire for revenge had not yet found their rightful target. This throne was only the beginning, because another fire burned within me, a fire I had never felt before, a fire I had never felt before, extinguishing the fires of loneliness and anger. That fire burned with a brilliance that eclipsed all the joy and splendor of Olympus. Even within the cold stone walls of the underworld, it warmed my heart and melted every last splinter within me. Love, or the illusion it presented to me.
Aphrodite, beauty itself. She was like a light brighter than the stars, radiating from the wind, said to permeate every atom of Olympus. More than a goddess, she was existence's sweetest hymn, its most delicate flower, a force whose mere glance could enchant the seas, and a whisper could enchant the mountains. Her presence was like a melody that soothed even the mountainous and harsh soul of Olympus. But beauty doesn't always shed light. Sometimes it dazzles, sometimes it captivates, sometimes it blinds, hiding even the sharpest gaze behind a smoky veil. It prevents you from seeing the truth behind beauty, concealing the darkness within. When I encountered him, I was already blind to the false glitter of Olympus, the duplicitous nature of the gods, and the bottomless pits of my own heart. Years of loneliness had blinded the windows of my soul. His light was like the first and only light to pierce this darkness, so I didn't hesitate to be captivated by his brilliance, to bring out the wounded child within me. He was like salvation, like a dream. It was like seeing the sparkle of a diamond in the depths of a coal-black cave. When Zeus's booming voice echoed throughout the halls of Olympus, he declared that this marriage would honor me. This marriage will honor you, Hephaestus. It sounded like a blessing, a gift. But in those magnificent halls of Olympus, I saw not blessing, but a gleam of mockery in the eyes of the gods. I, lame and ugly, was given to him as a prize. Like a slave to his master, I was a gift,
the most precious jewel, the most magnificent crown, the most beautiful goddess, and beside her, a handful of soot and coal dust. It was as if Zeus were punishing both me and Aphrodite with this marriage, me for daring to possess him, and him as a price for his beauty. And I accepted, because for the first time I wanted to feel equal among the gods. Perhaps this was my greatest flaw, wanting equality as a god. In the eyes of Olympus, I was a flaw, a craftsman underground, an outsider existing by my own fire. Perhaps my love for Aphrodite would elevate me to the same level as the other gods. Perhaps her beauty would cover my ugliness and grant me a sense of dignity. Perhaps she would truly open the gates of Olympus to me for the first time. Despite everything, it was a hope. But I was wrong. The gates of Olympus are never open to anything but beauty. When I looked at Aphrodite, I saw only a reflection in her eyes. It was the reflection of someone else, someone far stronger, far more handsome, far more heroic. That reflection wasn't me. That reflection was Ares. I realized that beauty, like a soulless mirror, reflects another heart, another body. From that moment on, her marriage to me felt like a mask, a role play. Every dear Hephaestus that fell from her lips was a lie, a deception.
Love, strangely enough, this was the thing even the gods were most mistaken about, the thing they were most burned by, the thing they played with most. For me, love was a love that didn't wait for me, didn't return to me, didn't touch me. My love glowed like a hot coal in the fire of my forge, but it was too distant to pour even a drop of water on that fire. Its soul wasn't with me, but somewhere else, in another camp, in the midst of another battle. Its laughter would turn in another direction. Every laugh would echo like a hammer blow against my heart. Its heart wouldn't strike my lonely, smoky soul, but the loud battle cry of Ares, the god of war. I realized then that no matter how creative I was, no matter how powerful my creations, in its eyes, I was merely a lame, ugly blacksmith. And I, this master smith of the underworld, grew colder with each passing night. Every hammer blow was a scorn, every flame a shame. Every forging I did was a rebellion. My nights were sleepless and restless. The smell of iron and coal clung to my skin. This scent was like a stain on the delicate, elegant halls of Olympus, and I was that stain itself. Even the wind of Olympus seemed to flee from my scent. Whispers rose in the halls of Olympus, spreading like a storm. The whispers struck my heart like poisoned arrows from the mouth of a god. What does a lame god have to do with beauty? Why did Aphrodite fall for that man who smelled of iron? This decision of Zeus's must be his greatest joke. These whispers ricocheted off the delicate, elegant walls of Olympus like bullets. They were laughing, loud, mocking laughter. To them,
This marriage was a comedy. My love, my hope was their entertainment, and I was melting inside, not in the flames, in my shame. But let them not forget, the more iron breaks, the harder it becomes. And I prepared for a response, not a mockery. The loneliness I'd accumulated inside me boiled like a volcano. My anger and desire for revenge inspired me to create a new work of art. One day, those smiling faces, those mocking glances, those false laughter would give way to silence, to terror. In places they couldn't see, deep underground, in a workshop no one could reach, I was forging a new creation. This work was a trap that would chain not only the gods, but also love. The fire of my forge merged with the fire of my vengeance. Every blow I made was a promise that would penetrate the hearts of Aphrodite and Ares. This web of gold and bronze was thinner than a spider's web, yet strong enough to hold even the most powerful gods. Invisible, yet untouchable. Each thread was a piece of my broken heart. Revenge is sometimes as heavy as a hammer, sometimes as sharp as a glance. My revenge would be both as heavy as a hammer blow and as sharp as a glance. Before the eyes of Olympus, I would unmask those who mocked them, those who shamed me, those who defiled beauty and love. Their false faces would melt in the fire of my vengeance. And on that day, Olympus would truly respect my art for the first time. And that day would come. I, the Lord of Iron and Fire, didn't just forge weapons this time. I didn't place a lightning bolt in Zeus's hand, nor a spear in Ares's bloody hands. This time, the fire of my workshop served a colder, more subtle form of vengeance. This time, I worked not with jealousy, but with reason and with long patience. I wove webs so fine, so hidden, so ghostly, that even the sharpest eyes of a god could not detect them. They yielded neither to the light of the sun, nor to the silvery luster of the moon. They resembled neither the hardness of metal, nor the softness of fabric. They were made of threads that were invisible, unbreakable, cold and thin, until the time came. These needle points were a part of years of loneliness, of every broken piece of my heart, and of every trace of pain in my soul. They were too delicate even for the gods to feel, as silent as the whisper of the wind. But when they fell, they were too strong for mortals to move, as crushing as the weight of a mountain. I worked not for days, but for months. The fire in my forge burned as fiercely as ever, but in that fire I was forging not iron, but my revenge. My hands trembled as they wove each thread, each knot, a tremor not of fatigue, but of reliving the memory of a betrayal with each knot. That innocent, captivating smile of Aphrodite, That smile, never directed sincerely at me, constantly evoked a memory of another god, especially the god of war. That poisonous, arrogant whisper of Ares, that voice echoing in my ears, constantly humiliating me, making me feel like nothing. And above all, that mocking look of Zeus, that look that had remained like a wound in my soul since the day he cast me from Olympus. It was all in this web now. Each knot held an echo, a trace of these pains. This web wasn't just a physical trap. It was a reflection of my pain, my loneliness, my anger. I had processed so many memories, so many emotions into it, that it felt like my soul itself. Then the time came. My patience had flowed like an underground river, finally reaching the ocean. I knew their weakness all too well, the divine blindness of love and passion. One silent, gloomy night on Olympus, when everything had fallen asleep, Ares, the proud, arrogant god of war, crept stealthily into Aphrodite's chamber from the shadows. It was one of Olympus's greatest secrets, but for me it was merely a moment of anticipation. At that moment, the trap was sprung. The delicate, finely woven net around the bed suddenly activated. The bedroom was ablaze, like 1,000 stars exploding. It was as if the sun itself had fallen into the fires of a forge deep within the earth. The delicate net hung like lightning, enveloping those two flawless, powerful bodies. They remained like statues, locked together yet immobile. Beauty and war were simultaneously captive to my art. Aphrodite's flawless skin, Ares's powerful muscles were bound by my invisible cords. I opened the door, and slowly, step by step, I entered the room. At that moment, with my heart trembling like a mortal, I called upon all the gods. I cried out loud in my smoky voice, "Come and see! All beings of Olympus, come and taste this great feast!" From Zeus's throne to Poseidon, Athena to Hermes, Apollo to Dionysus, they all came. Their eyes were filled with surprise at first, then wonder, and finally shock. The halls of Olympus were deserted, and every god had gathered at the door of Aphrodite's chamber to witness this shameful scene. They all saw it. There's my wife. There's the god of war. Here's the naked, shameful body of betrayal, born from the union of beauty and war. In that moment, I didn't speak. Not a word of insult, not a word of contempt, not a word of revenge escaped my lips. I simply stared. In response to all the whispers, all the mocking laughter, and all the contemptuous looks, I simply watched them silently. My greatest weapon wasn't to speak, but to show. They laughed. They laughed loudly, with laughter. Just as they had mocked my marriage, they mocked the shame of Aphrodite and Ares. But there was something else in their eyes now, respect and fear. For now they knew, the Lane God can not only walk, he weaves webs.
He chains not iron, not swords, not helmets, but minds. And most importantly, he could humiliate even the mightiest and most beloved gods of Olympus. My art was not only to create, but also to destroy. And this destruction was not the battle cry they were accustomed to, but the silent, terrifying revenge of a craftsman. But that night, I didn't just chain them, I chained myself as well. Revenge wasn't sweet. On the contrary, it was bitter. Because on Aphrodite's beautiful face, in the midst of that shameful moment, there was no shame as I'd expected. There was only anger, that deep, undeniable anger she felt for me, for my lame, ugly husband. In that moment, I realized that no matter how much revenge I exacted, her feelings for me would never change. I might have chained love, but I could never win. Not her heart, not her respect, not her love. I had only taken my revenge for a moment. All that remained was the bitter memory of the anger in those eyes. And that night, when I returned to the underworld, even the fire of my forge felt cold.
I chained love. I exposed betrayal. I exposed the false glitter of Olympus, the rot behind those flawless masks. But after all this triumph, I couldn't fill the void in my heart. On the contrary, that void was even greater than before, for it now bore the weight of a bitter disappointment, brought not only by loneliness, but also by revenge. In that moment, standing naked before all the gods of Olympus, the look of anger Aphrodite shot me, inflicted the deepest wound on my soul. There was no shame in her eyes, only a mocking look that made me despise myself. Aphrodite didn't return to me, not a word of regret, not an apology, not even the slightest trace of affection. She continued to wander the halls of Olympus like a shadow, fleeing from me, hating me. Her beauty had become a poisonous flower for me. Ares remained unscathed. He shrugged, grabbing his sword and rushing into a new battle, chasing a new love. His pride was as thick as his armor. And the gods? They forgot, as always. Just as a child forgets his toy, they forgot my revenge and Aphrodite's shame. For on Olympus, memory isn't as enduring as entertainment. One day's biggest scandal would be covered up by a new gossip, a new laugh the next. Instead of learning from the lessons of the past, they preferred to focus on the new pleasures of the future. But I didn't forget. The burning was still within me. That fire was now a flame that heated not only the iron, but also my soul, reshaping it. In the midst of the fire, I was left alone. But this loneliness wasn't the desperate, devastating loneliness I'd felt when I first fell from Olympus. It was a loneliness accumulated over centuries by anger, resentment, and the desire for revenge. A loneliness that strengthened me and steeled my soul. This loneliness had become my most loyal companion, my greatest source of inspiration. Centuries later, I returned to that dark workshop, deep underground, in the heart of volcanoes, in that nook where magma rivers sing. But this time, the hammer struck differently. Each blow carried a different echo, just like the hardening scabs on the wounds in my heart. My hammer fell not with blind rage as before, but with wisdom and cold determination. I no longer served the gods, their whims and their arrogance. I did things to dominate them, to overshadow their power, to shake the archaic order of Olympus. Every blow was aimed at a god's arrogance. Every spark replaced the mocking laughter that echoed through the halls of Olympus. From the ashes, from the soot, from the womb of pain and loneliness, a new Hephaestus was born, the god of iron, who first built himself, forged his own worth and power with his own hands, and then defied the gods. The works I created were no longer merely aesthetic marvels or instruments of war. They had become elements of cosmic balance, silent enforcers of divine justice. Perhaps I was a craftsman, but even more so, a master maker of destiny. For the hammer not only shapes iron, but also touches souls, reveals hidden truths, and seeks justice. My works would profoundly impact the foundations even the most powerful gods of Olympus thought unshakable, turning the hidden wheels of the divine order and making them pay the price for their arrogance. Perhaps a crown, perhaps a statue, perhaps simply an invisible mechanism, but each would serve its purpose. When the gods came again and demanded something, they were no longer met by the same submissive, silent blacksmith. I answered with my eyes, "Everything you do has a price, and that price can sometimes be much more than just gold, sometimes much more than your pride." My voice was calm, but my gaze was hard as iron. Now their demands were part of my game. Each new work rose as a warning, a counterweight to their uncontrolled power. Hephaestus was no longer a partner, nor a victim. He was a force. He had fallen from Olympus's favor, yet he had established his own empire underground. He was a god who judged wrongs, reborn from his own ashes, rising like a new titan from the ruins of his former self. My lameness was no longer a weakness, but a symbol of my connection to the earth, of the steadiness of my feet.
And Olympus's highest flame was no longer the fire that had drawn the laughter of those who mocked me, the fire that seared my soul. It was the flame of my will, my resolve, and my vengeance.
rising from the underworld, illuminating all of Olympus and simultaneously deterring it. It was a force to be respected. My fire was my very being. And now Olympus would feel its warmth more deeply than ever. This was my ascension, and my story was etched into eternity by its eternal glow. When I was born, the stars hid their eyes. The sky was silent because I was ugly. My birth wasn't a miracle the gods transformed into a feast. The sky didn't fill with colors, nor did the gods sing. I came into the world like a revulsion amidst the stillness. The silence was as heavy as my footsteps. And the first eyes to look was my mother, Hera. I looked at her. I saw no smile, no curiosity, only icy disgust. She wasn't a goddess confronting my presence, but rather a judge witnessing a flaw. In that moment I understood. Beauty was the queen of these thrones, and I was the embodiment of ugliness. Hera, mother of the gods, adorned with strength and dignity. Even she could not bear the face of a child, one of her own blood. At that moment, my fate was written. A birth denied, a being excluded, a god longed for oblivion. Motherhood succumbed to formlessness. Without a single touch, without holding me, without whispering a word, he threw me from the highest point of Olympus. My fall was not a punishment, but the echo of negligence. The wind did not carry me, the clouds did not follow me. I was thrown from the sky to the heart of the earth with a scream that did not yet know my name. Mine was a body trapped between the cruelty of the heights and the silence of the earth. The stones could not destroy me, but rotten words shook my soul. The gods remained silent. Neither Zeus was angry with me, nor Apollo took pity, for I did not exist. No legends, no songs were sung about me. The gods were complete without me. I was simply too much. When I opened my eyes, there was no light. The earth accepted me, but not with love, with loneliness. In a cave close to the magma, out of the darkness, I formed my voice. My first sound wasn't a word, but a growl. When the echo of my presence hit the cave walls, it was as if the earth said to me, "You exist," just once. Then it fell silent. I reached out to the stone. With the weight of my crippled body, I shaped the rock. As I shaped the rock, a spark ignited within me. Perhaps the gods rejected me, but the stone listened. From that moment on, I became friends with fire. The fire didn't burn me, it built me. The sound of the anvil competed with my heart. Every blow became a word, every spark an answer. I asked myself questions the gods didn't ask. Why was I created this way? Is godhood measured by beauty? Is ugliness a curse or a test? The fire didn't answer, but it didn't exactly stop either. Every blast of heat was a response. As the iron took shape, I took shape again. As I forged my first weapon, my mother's silhouette came to mind. Absent the hands she had refrained from reaching out to me, I forged the metal surface. Every scratch was a mark of neglect. Time passed, but I didn't know how. It wasn't the gods' time for me. I kept time by the sound of hammers pounding underground. I had no night. I had no day either, but I could create seasons with the heat of iron. In my own universe, I became more creative than the gods, but no one saw. I didn't want eyes to see, but I wasn't too small to be seen either. Loneliness birthed me, but loneliness was also a teacher. I learned philosophy from its echoes. From every rock I created a morality. Instead of the mercy of the gods, I set my own rule. Creativity is the cry of ugliness. In that cave, I forged weapons for the gods. They praised my works, but never acknowledged me as the creator. Everyone touched the iron, but no one could touch me. And with time, another voice echoed inside me. Am I a god or a shadow of the gods? Loneliness also taught me pride, because I was able to forge elegance from ugliness. I was able to bring splendor from the unseen. Then I realized I am not an outcast, but a transformer.